Hi guys! In this video, we will discuss the formulas and nomenclature of ionic and covalent compounds. So these topics were already discussed or introduced in your high school chemistry classes, so this should just be a review. So the nomenclature conventions discussed here is the basis for writing chemical formulas, and it will be applied throughout our chemistry lecture or laboratory classes. By the end of this discussion, you should be able to first distinguish ionic compounds from covalent compounds based on their chemical formula and the elements that they are made up of. And second, to apply the appropriate nomenclature rules to convert between the chemical names and chemical formulas for both ionic and covalent compounds. A chemical formula is a symbolic representation of a compound's composition, and it's expressed through element symbols and numerical subscripts. So it functions as the standardized notation of chemistry, telling us the identity and how many atoms or ions are present for a given chemical formula. So for example, let's consider calcium hydroxide, CaOH2. The symbol Ca denotes calcium, while O means that you have oxygen present in the formula and H is hydrogen. Then we have parenthesis on OH that denotes that hydroxide or OH minus is a polyatomic ion. And lastly, we have subscript 2, which indicates that there are two hydroxide units that are present per formula unit. Each element is designated by a symbol comprising one or two letters. When two letters are used, the first is capitalized and the second is written in lowercase. So for example, we have Na for sodium, big N but small a. And also, it should be noted that certain symbols do not correspond directly to the element's modern English name. So for sodium, the element is sodium, but the chemical symbol is Na. This is because some element symbols are derived from their Latin names. So sodium is derived from natrium. That's why even though sodium is the element, Na is the chemical symbol. The same with iron. For example, we have iron as the element, but its chemical symbol is Fe, which is derived from ferrum. So you should be familiar with these Latin-derived symbols since we will use them in naming ionic compounds. Now, let's differentiate ionic and covalent bonding. So, for ionic compounds and covalent compounds, we can determine them by the nature of its constituent elements. So, a bond formed between a metal and a non-metal, this results in an ionic compound. So, the metal atom loses one or more electrons to form a cation, a positively charged species, while the non-metal atom gains those electrons to form an anion or negatively charged species. So the resulting oppositely charged ions are held together by electrostatic attraction, and it produces a repeating crystal lattice with correspondingly high melting points and high boiling points. So in essence, you have an ionic bond if it's between a metal and a non-metal. Meanwhile, for covalent bonding, a bond formed between two nonmetals results in a covalent compound. So in which electrons are shared rather than transferred, and it produces discrete molecular units with generally lower melting and boiling points. So this distinction must be established prior to applying any nomenclature rule, since ionic and covalent compounds are governed by different naming conventions. We can use the concept of electronegativity to guide us if an element is a metal or a non-metal, and therefore we can use that to classify if a compound is ionic or covalent, depending on the atoms that are involved in bonding. So recall that electronegativity, this is defined as an atom's relative tendency to attract shared electrons within a bond. And if we look at the periodic table, the trend is that electronegativity increases across a period from left to right, and it decreases down a group. Consequently, the most electronegative elements are located in the upper right section of the periodic table, while the least electronegative elements, or the metals, they are located in the lower left region. As the rule of thumb, a very large electronegativity difference between two bonding atoms, it favors electron transfer, and therefore you will have an ionic bond, or the resulting compound is an ionic compound. For a small difference in electronegativity, it favors electron sharing and therefore covalent bond formation. You can also have polar covalent bond if there is difference in electronegativity, but you have nonpolar covalent bond if there is no electronegative difference. Now let's discuss naming binary covalent compounds. Binary covalent compounds are formed from two nonmetallic elements, and we will use the following rules. Number 1, the less electronegative element is named first. Number 2, the first element retains its name, while the second element's name is modified to have suffix "ide." And number 3, a numerical prefix corresponding to the subscript of each element is applied, but note that the prefix mono is omitted when only one atom of the first element is present. So for example, we have CO2. Applying these rules, carbon being the less electronegative, it is cited first without a prefix since only one carbon atom is present. And oxygen, it is renamed as oxide and assigned the prefix di since we have subscript 2. Therefore, CO2 is named as carbon dioxide. The numerical prefixes corresponding to 1 to 10 are as follows. So we have 1 as mono, 2 as di, 3 as tri, 4 as tetra, and so on. So you should memorize these as they are applied consistently throughout the covalent nomenclature. Also, we have the following rule. Note that when a prefix terminating in the vowel A or O precedes an element name beginning with a vowel also, the terminal vowel of the prefix will be removed. So for example, for penta, it will be pentoxide, not pentaoxide. Okay, let's apply the rules on these formulas. First, we have PBr5. Phosphorus is less electronegative and therefore it is named first as is. Then we have Br5, so 5 bromine atoms become pentabromide. So the name is phosphorus pentabromide. Next example, BrF5. So using the same logic, bromine is named first as is, and then we have 5 fluorine atoms, and the name will be bromine pentafluoride. And last example, P2O5. In here, we have 2 phosphorus atoms, and it means that we need to add di prefix for the phosphorus. And then for 5 oxygens, it would normally be pentaoxide, but remember our vowel rule, we drop the A before O, giving us this name, the diphosphorus pentoxide. For covalent compounds, we can also derive a formula from a name. We just apply the naming rules in reverse. So first, the element symbols are written in the sequence given by the name, except for hydrogen, to the general convention of citing the more metallic element first. And then number 2, the numerical prefix is then converted directly to a subscript. So for example, we have tetraphosphorus hexoxide. The prefix tetra indicates 4 phosphorus atoms, and then the prefix hexa indicates 6 oxygen atoms. So if we write the chemical formula, that will be P4O6. Exceptions to the use of Greek prefixes are molecular compounds containing hydrogen. So traditionally, many of these compounds are called either by their common names or by names that do not specifically indicate the number of hydrogen atoms present. So for example, we can call H2O as water, NH3 as ammonia, PH3 as phosphine. Also, note that the order of writing the elements in the formulas for hydrogen compounds can be irregular. So for example, in water and hydrogen sulfide, H is written first, whereas it appears last in the other compounds. But in methane and other binary organic compounds containing carbon and hydrogen, carbon is usually written first. Let's now move on to ionic compounds. Binary ionic compounds are formed from the combination of a metal and a nonmetal. And in this process, the metal atom loses one or more valence electrons, forming a positively charged species, which we call cation, while the nonmetal atom gains those electrons to form an ion. And this interaction is electrostatic in nature, and it is the ionic bond. The following sections is about the identification of common cations and anions and the nomenclature of ionic compounds, including those transition metals and as well as hydrates, and the derivation of their corresponding formulas. For main group elements, ionic charge is predictable based on group number. So group 1 elements consistently form cations with a charge of +1. For example, if sodium, if it loses one electron, it forms sodium plus cation. The same with potassium plus and lithium plus cation. For group 2 elements, they form cations with a charge of +2. So for example, we have magnesium 2 plus, calcium 2 plus, barium 2 plus. And for group 13, +3. So that's the case for aluminum 3 plus cation. Among the nonmetals, group 17 elements, or the halogens, they form an ions with a charge of -1. If we name them as an ion, they will have an ending of "ide." So for example, for fluorine atom, if it gains one electron, that will be F-, and we will call it as fluoride anion. The same for chlorine atom, as an ion, it will be chloride anion. Next, group 16 elements, they form an ions with a charge of -2, and that's O2-, S2-, Se2-, and as an ion, we will call them as oxide, sulfide, and selenide, respectively. For group 15 elements, they form an ions with a charge of -3, and that is nitride and phosphide. And for group 14 elements, they will form an ions with -4 charge. And that is the case for carbide and silicide anion. So this pattern reflects each atom's tendency to gain the electron configuration of the nearest noble gas. So for example, sodium, if it becomes sodium plus, that is isoelectronic with the nearest noble gas. For transition metals, or the metals that are found in the D block of the periodic table, this is the complete list for transition metal ion names. We have the following transition metals, wherein each forming 2 common cations. And it is also shown in stock system and older classical system. The pattern to notice is that the classical system's suffix is not random or arbitrary. The us suffix, it always marks the lower charge for the given metal, and x suffix is always assigned to the higher charge. So for example, chromus is Cr2+, but chromic is Cr3+. And the same pattern holds all the way down to cuprous and cupric. So for example, cuprous, that's +1, but cupric, that's +2. One special case is mercury. So mercury 1 ion is not simply Hg+, it's actually a diatomic ion, Hg2 2+, where the two mercury atoms share the +2 charge between them, which is why each individual mercury atom is still considered a +1 for naming purposes. Next, this table shows the common polyatomic ions. So among the species, only ammonium, NH4+, is the cation, and then the rest are anions. You should be familiar with the name of these. So also, I would like to emphasize some things. First, several ions come in acid, base, or oxidation state pairs. For example, carbonate, CO3 2-, and hydrogen carbonate, HCO3-. So they are just one hydrogen away. The same with phosphate, PO4 3-, and its mono and dihydrogen forms. So we have dihydrogen phosphate and hydrogen phosphate. Next, we also have sulfate and sulfite. For sulfate, that's SO4 2-, but for sulfite, it's SO3 2-. So the difference is only the number of oxygen atoms. The same with what else? Chromate. So for example, we have chromate CrO4 2-, but if we have dichromate, we have Cr2O7 2-. Second, watch the closely related pairs that they are easy to confuse. For example, we have cyanide, that's Cn-, but we also have cyanate. So cyanate, on the other hand, is CnO-. Okay? For naming ionic compounds, the main rule is simple compared to covalent naming. So cation name first, followed by the anion name. And most importantly, no prefixes, or we don't say disodium or anything like that for a simple binary ionic compound, because the formula's subscript are already fixed by the charges. So there's no ambiguity to resolve with a prefix. So for example, if we mix sodium cation and chloride anion, that just becomes sodium chloride. Another example is if we combine lithium cation with carbonate anion, even though the resulting formula is Li2CO3, we have subscript 2 for lithium, but we will just name it as lithium carbonate, not dilithium carbonate. When naming an ionic compound containing a transition metal that is capable of forming more than one cation, the appropriate Roman numeral must be placed, and it is determined by the requirement that the compound be electrically neutral overall. So for example, FeCl3, since we have 3 chloride anions, and we know that chloride anion each carrying a -1 charge, therefore to be electrically neutral, it needs the ion to have +3 charge. So we name it as iron 3 chloride, or if we use the old system, that's ferric chloride. So another example is NiNO3 2. In this compound, there will be 2 nitrate anions, and each nitrate anions, as we look at the table, it will have -1 charge. And therefore, it needs the nickel counter ion to have +2 charge to be electrically neutral. So this charge balancing procedure will be the essential method for assigning the correct Roman numeral. So if we name NiNO3 2, that will be nickel 2 nitrate. Now, for writing formulas from names, the easiest way to do this is the crisscross method. So in here, we write both ions with their charges and then crisscross. The numeric value of each ion's charge becomes the subscript of the other ion. So for example, let's consider calcium oxide. Calcium is +2, oxide is -2. If we cross them, you'd write Ca2O2. But that's not fully reduced, so the last step is always to simplify the smallest whole number ratio, which here just cancels down to CaO. Therefore, calcium oxide will have a formula of CaO. Next, one more detail for polyatomic ions. If there's only one of that ion in that formula, you may omit the parenthesis. So for example, in sodium nitrate, nitrate there is not enclosed since you only have one nitrate ion. But the moment you need more than one, parentheses go around the ion. So for example, in barium phosphate, phosphate there is enclosed in parentheses since you have subscript 2 for the phosphate anion. Next is hydrates. So some ionic compounds, they crystallize with a specific number of water molecules that are locked into their structure. So that water is called the water of hydration or water of crystallization. And we name these by taking the regular ionic compound name and adding prefix plus hydrate at the end. So we use the same numerical prefixes we learned for covalent compounds. So for example, this is an example of hydrated ionic compound, NiSO4.6H2O. So the ionic part is nickel 2 sulfate. And since we have 6 water molecules, we will add hexahydrate. So the compound name will be nickel 2 sulfate hexahydrate. So that little dot in the formula is how we show the water is associated, but it's not chemically bonded to the metal. Writing hydrate formulas follows the exact same logic. First, write the ordinary anhydrous ionic formula or the ionic compound name without the water, and then add a dot followed by a coefficient equal to whatever the prefix in the name says. So for example, we have magnesium sulfate heptahydrate. Magnesium sulfate is MgSO4 on its own, but since we have heptahydrate in the name, it tells us it has 7 water molecules. So the full hydrate formula is as follows: MgSO4.7H2O. Now let's move on to naming acids. Binary acids contain just hydrogen and one other nonmetal. The naming pattern is hydro plus the nonmetal's name plus ic acid. So if hydrogen is bonded with fluorine, that is HF, and the name is hydrofluoric acid. The same with HBr, it becomes hydrobromic acid. Also, since acids are essentially covalent compounds, since they are made up of hydrogen and another nonmetal, we can use covalent compound naming conventions. Both names are actually correct. It just depends on the physical state. So for our convention, we use hydrofluoric acid when it's dissolved in water or if it's an aqueous phase, and hydrogen fluoride for pure gaseous phase. So we have same compound but different name depending on the physical state. Next, let's move on to oxyacids. Oxyacids are acids derived from oxyanions, and the ending tells you exactly which oxyanion they came from. So let's look at the following diagram and let's start with 8. So if the oxyanion name ends in 8, the acid name ends in ic acid. So that's the case for BrO3 minus. It's bromate, but as an oxyacid, HBrO3, that will be named as bromic acid. So another example will be For example, NO3 minus, it's nitrate. The oxoacid name will be nitric acid, HNO3. If the oxygen ion ends in ite, so for example, BrO2 minus, it's bromite, the acid ends in ous acid. So from bromite, it will become bromous acid for HBrO2. The same for nitrite. Nitrite is NO2 minus. The oxoacid name of HNO2 minus will be nitrous acid. Now let's look at the following oxoanion and oxoacids derived from halogens. So for example, we have BrO4 minus down to BrO minus. The name will depend on how many oxygen atoms are present. And we should see the pattern on how we name them. So for example, BrO4 minus, we have 4 oxygen atoms and the name will be per plus the name plus 8. If we are considering the oxoanion, followed by 8, followed by ite, and followed by hypo, plus the name plus ite. That's why in bromine, that will be perbromate, bromate, bromite, and hypobromite, if we are talking about the oxoanion. But if we are considering the oxoacid name, if we are bonded with hydrogen atom, the oxoacid name will be bromic acid, bromous acid, and hypobromous acid. So another example is if we consider chlorine. So the most number of oxygens, ClO4 minus, that will be perchlorate, if we are talking about the oxoanion name, followed by chlorate, followed by chlorite, and then hypochlorite. And then if we convert it as an oxoacid name, HClO4 will become perchloric acid, HClO3 is chloric acid, HClO2 will be chlorous acid, and lastly, HClO will be hypochlorous acid. Now, let's incorporate or integrate all of the rules that we have discussed, and let's answer the following examples. Number 1 given is LiOH. So based on the chemical formula, let's name the following compound. LiOH is made up of lithium and it's group 1, so its cation will be lithium plus. And then it's paired with OH minus, which is called a hydroxide anion. That's why the name will be lithium hydroxide. Number 2, it's ammonium sulfite. So let's determine whether if it's covalent or ionic. But as we can see in the table, ammonium is a cation, polyatomic cation, and sulfite is polyatomic anion. So therefore, ammonium sulfite is an ionic compound. And doing the crisscross method for the charges, the chemical formula will be NH42SO3. Number 3, we have Hg2NO3 2. So for this compound, again, it is an ionic compound made up of mercury, which is a transition metal, and nitrate, a polyatomic anion. So the cation will be Hg2 2+, and anion will be NO3 minus. And again, recall in Hg2 2+, even though it's +2 charge overall, this is mercury 1. Okay, so the name will be mercury 1 nitrate, or using the old system, it's mercurous nitrate. Number 4, diboron trioxide. So again, diboron trioxide is made up of boron and oxygen, which are both nonmetals. That's why this is a covalent compound. And recall, for covalent compounds, we always indicate the prefix. So boron there, it has di, and then oxide has tri. That's why we have B2O3 for number 4. Next, SrCl2.4H2O, let's name first the ionic compound. This is strontium chloride, but in the formula, we incorporate .4H2O. So that's hydrate, and since you have coefficient 4, it will become strontium chloride tetrahydrate. And lastly, we have chromic acid. So chromic acid is derived from an ion, which is chromate, CrO4 2 minus. And to write the oxy acid, a negative 2 charge needs two hydrogens to balance it. That's why we have H2CrO4. So that ends our discussion.